What's up, guys? This is world champion Stevan here. I'm here with my dad, my life coach, my dad, my best friend. We're here to talk about wrestling dads. This is a super important topic because me and my dad have a pretty unique relationship in the sport of wrestling. Wrestling is a sport that a lot of the times is very intimate with the family relationship and the family dynamic of a dad coming in and having some impact or relationship with their son. In wanting to get in the sport of wrestling, or son or daughter, and trying to get and push them to make sure that they get the best out of them. But reaching the highest level of the sport, I see wrestling dads all over the relationship with wrestling dads and their son, and how sometimes it gets a bad rap with the sport, and there's a bad reputation of like their dads being a little bit too hard on the son,
or daughter,
yeah. And I just find it a little bit interesting that I have this relationship where me and my dad, I've been able to reach the pinnacle of the sport, having my dad as my coach and understanding the sport. So today we're going to talk about 5 tips for wrestling dads as they go into the sport with their son or daughter.
Well, I'll start off right away, and recently Flo did a little thing with you, and I jumped in for a little bit.
Yeah.
And one of the points that I brought up, they asked me like, hey, what do you think is real important, with your child? And one thing that I learned early on was to, because I was like most parents out there. I love my kid, but I loved winning, and I wanted him to be the best. But, soon after the sport started, I found out how intense the sport was, and how crazy it could be. And ultimately, I decided that I was going to love my kid more than I loved the sport. And so that's tip number 1. Love your child, your son or daughter, more than you love the sport. In other words, your job as a parent is to bring this person up and to protect them mentally, physically. Our job is emotionally to support them and build them up and to grow them into adults someday. And one of the ways not to do it is to knock them down, get on them, beat them up. It's to build them up. And it's hard to do in this sport, parents. It's tough because we want to win. We're competitive, right?
Yeah, and I think another really important part before even diving deeper into more tips is my dad didn't wrestle. Okay, so he has an unbiased opinion on how his previous experience in the sport of wrestling. He has no emotions that said, hey, this is what I did to be good. This is the things that I wish I could have accomplished, and I want to live through my son to do it. So he actually was able to learn the sport of wrestling with me along the way and study it.
So if we don't show a good example of that, the loving example of, hey, it's okay. Things are going to be all right. I love you. I'm gonna help you the best we can. It's okay to win. It's okay to lose. If we don't show that example, mentally we're gonna be pounding the heck out of them, and we could damage them long term. Point number 2 is make sure it's your child's dream and not your dream.
I think I've always had the dream to want to be a world champion and an Olympic champion. My dad just wanted me to accomplish that goal for myself,
Stevan's the one that came to me at about age 10 or 11 crying after a loss of getting his butt kicked by guys just in our little town here, and saying, Dad, I want you to help me. I want to be the best wrestler in the world. And I said, well, you can't beat the guys here in Cedar Lake, Indiana. How are you going to beat the best guys in the world? And I'm thinking, what the heck's he talking about? But he's crying and he's begging me, I want you to help me. I want you to help me. And I said, hey, we'll help you. We'll get the coaches. No, I want you to help me. I want to be the best in the world. And I'm going, I don't know how this is going to be possible. We're not beating Cedar Lake, Indiana kids. But you know what? It was his dream, it was his goal, it was his vision.
True.
And my job as a parent, as a protector, as a steward of my son, is to help him achieve those dreams and goals and find the resources around us to get that accomplished. Tip number 3 is creating good habits versus reinforcing bad habits. And what I mean by that is, I have a little different take than most wrestlers. I know I'm a little bit of an anomaly here, but I've always felt this way. We didn't go to a lot of wrestling tournaments, national tournaments when Stevan was a kid. He wasn't good enough, and I wasn't going to spend my hard-earned dollars on taking him to a tournament, spending $1,000 when he couldn't beat the kid in Cedar Lake, Indiana, and I'm going to send him to Tulsa? What's wrong with me? My job is to help him get better, so we spent that money and time in our basement drilling good positions, getting rid of his bad habits, creating new habits. over and over and over and over again, as opposed to going out there, losing in the second match, spending $1,000. I could have spent that money on private lessons. I could have spent it in a lot of places, but that's not the place to spend it.
Yeah.
There is a time and a place, right,
Yep.
for tournaments?
Winning a little kiddie state tournament means zero. I know so many people that have won all these kids tournaments and then don't end up accomplishing goals that actually matter and that can get them far. So in my opinion, I think that, taking the time to reassess, let the kid rest, let your son or daughter take some time to actually focus on things, getting better, investing in private lessons, investing in, spending time going into really good training opportunities instead of putting your money into these tournaments there's a point where you need to learn how to compete as an athlete, but some of these little kids tournaments where you're wrestling 50, 60 matches a year is a little bit ridiculous in my opinion.
Point number 4, I believe it is, become a student of the sport.
Let me talk about that a little bit for this point about classroom versus homework. And I want to first start with talking about an issue. This is probably one of the biggest, especially in a situation where having your dad as your main is a coach at a young level, at a young age, to kind of, as I'm improving, and having other coaches that are helping me develop along the way, helping him learn more, and to where now we're at the highest level, we can work simultaneously together. But when you're at a young age and you go into a wrestling club where you have other coaches that's their job to coach and put kids through practices, how do you manage dealing with that a lot of the times with parents not being allowed to go into the wrestling room? I was in a situation where my dad was allowed. Now, do I think that a lot of parents should be able to sit and right next to the mat and start yelling and screaming at their kid? No, I don't think so. The way that I think that you should deal with it now is if you want to be a dad or be that parent who's very being and helping their child reach their goals and be with them through every step. I think it's important to be able to go and watch the practices, but you don't have to. How they do it is be able to watch the practice through the window, however sit, pay attention to them, how that is. That's considered the classroom, right? What you said.
I would always go to every single practice, and I would sit there with a notebook and a pen, and I would take notes. So watch the whole practice. I would pick the brain of the coach afterwards because I was learning with him. I didn't know anything about wrestling. I was a jiu-jitsu guy. So I had to start from scratch. So everything the coaches did, everything they said, I absorbed it, I wrote it down, and then we did classroom work. But every good student, what does every good student do? Probably do their homework.
Sometimes that's not optional. You kind of have to do that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is,
no, I'm kidding.
I made him go back home, and we had a mat, a little 10 by 10,
Yeah.
and we'd go back after practice and do another 2 hours of what the coaches went over. And then we'd do it the next day, and we might have practice maybe 2 days later. And by the time we went back to practice, he had his assignment down, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I was ready to go into practice just like it would be like a tournament because I wanted to try the things that I was working on and learning and have extra repetitions, extra muscle memory, extra confidence to go in and be like, hey, I'm going to try this against good wrestlers in these live goes, in the drilling, in the sparring, whatever it was when we go to these practices, because I knew some of the best kids around the country, or at least in my area, were going to be there, that were going and competing at all of these other tournaments. So might as well give it my best and try making sure it works there in practice. Because one thing he always told me, whatever happens in practice is probably going to come out in your tournaments.
That's one thing I always say, inspect what you expect. So if our expectations of Stevan wrestling well, and if you as a parent out there, your expectation for your son or daughter to wrestle well, you either have to believe in the coach 100%, you still have to inspect that what's going on, that your expectations are still going to be followed through. Last point, growth mindset. I know I heard John Smith talking about this before in the past, and John was one of the early guys who had a growth mindset. He'd walk off the mat. Heard a podcast recently where he talked about losing, and he never pointed the finger at anybody. He never pointed on his coaches. He didn't point it on like I didn't have training partners. He always walked off the mat and said, hey, it was me who did it, and here's probably what happened. He was already starting to think of why he lost and how he can fix it. And by day 2, he wasn't mad anymore. He was motivated by how he was going to improve and how he took that opportunity of that loss to grow. So talk about growth mindset, Stevan, in every loss you've ever had and how that has motivated you, not turned you negative, not made you
Yeah.
angry, but motivated you towards.
I think a lot of the time is, especially when you're a kid, you feel that like losing means so much more, that like if you take a loss, it's really gonna hurt. I mean, just because this is an individual sport and you're the only one to blame, I mean, look at all these other sports that you know, basketball, football, soccer, they're losing all of the time. It's just the fact that they can take it because it's split up between a lot of things. So it's okay, like losing is a part of life, and you need to lose to be able to sometimes see, hey, the true colors can come out when you lose. What the real reason of what you need to be fixing. Up here in the mental game, what you're doing technically, how focused and driven you are at practice. There's a lot of things that go behind it, but losings and failure are a part of the sport, and you need to learn and grow from that to be able to you know, reach to the next level that you want to reach as a wrestler. And I think that's important for, you know, the point that my dad's trying to get to with the growth mindset. Dads, you have to recognize that losing and taking lumps along the way is okay, because you're not going to reach the next level. These are just small tests, small quizzes that allow you to level up, allow you to evolve as a wrestler, and to evolve your relationship between coach and athlete, father and child.
So I think what Stevan hit the nail on the head, and I always likened it to school, and I think most parents can relate to this with their children. We treated wrestling from the day one as like schoolwork. Stevan was always a good student, but he always knew that sometimes he might get a C or a D or an F on a quiz. But that was the end of that wasn't the end grade in the class, because Stevan usually got A's. We've somehow figured a way for him to come back, correct?
Yep.
And from those failures, from that C, from that D, from that F, and we went back to the drawing board in school, and we fixed those problems that he missed, and we practiced them over and over and over again until he got them right. Same with wrestling. You're going to miss some problems on your little quiz. So treat each little tournament, each little duel as a quiz. And then you might have a midterm exam, which might be semi-state, and then finals is state. Ultimately, you got to get an A on the
when it matters.
When it matters at finals, right? At state. That's when you have to get on a final examination. So it's not a lot of little quizzes along the way, right, Stevan? They're just little stepping stones. Well, I made this mistake, I'll fix this, I'll fix this. So use those opportunities to have a growth mindset and think positively when you lose. Grow from those situations so that it builds up to the right time and you're peaking at the right place at the right time to have your best performance.
Yep. All right, guys, that's all for today. Those are our 5 tips for the relationship between a wrestler and the wrestling dad. So if you guys like our content, be sure to subscribe to our channel, Stevan Micic. You get to see us preparing for the Olympic Games this summer, where I hope, God willing, I can win a gold medal. And like this video, keep the love coming. And yeah, we're going for gold together. So let's go.